do what I can to help to develop a healthy impact culture here at Staffs. And that's one that motivates and supports people to get engaged, to collaborate and to help to address some of the very complex challenges that the world faces. Lauren Rickards and colleagues published a report in 2020 outlining 3 generations of impact culture, which resonates strongly, I think, with University 3.0 concepts. So first generation impact culture is about demonstrating that the research is relevant, making it accessible and encouraging end users to adopt it. Second generation shifts the focus to working with partners to ensuring that the research is legitimate and has value and improving research impact literacy across the institution. But the third generation focuses on prioritising what is most important and generating synergies across projects, and it requires us to continually learn and improve and build. It sees impact as an ethos and is summed up by the quote on the slide here that research impact as an ethos reflects a fundamental shift towards a co-created, embedded and positive research impact culture. An approach to research impact that doesn't externalise the real world but sees academia as part of it. And researchers as partners within dynamic innovation ecosystems, willing and able to use their unique capabilities to help generate the positive transformational changes that are needed. Now, I think that a significant proportion of our impact can be seen as happening in this third generation space. This can be seen in our REF impact case studies, and it was also recognised and commented upon by several of our external impact case study reviewers during the REF preparations. But there are also challenges. Working in this way is complex, it's time-consuming, and it has to be viewed as a long-term endeavour. And it can be some of the most difficult type of impact to align with the REF requirements for impact case studies. So as I step into the time machine, I'm wondering how we will have managed to address these challenges.
Fabulous. Brilliant. And then we hand over now to the panel. We did have... Anna has reported that she has a family illness, but I'm going to hand over to Mike.
You mentioned the time machine. There's actually a clock on the top of this. I feel like a Marty McFly. Well, this is the film that we made, Running Naked, which we shot through the master's course at Staffordshire University. I'm a film producer, so I've produced 9 features, got BAFTA nominations and all that kind of stuff. A songwriter and a sometime teacher when they have me. And I really think making films at this level and at this level of excellence is the way forward for universities. I think we should aim for the best, and what I wanted to do in making this film was to make the best for me as a film producer, but also for the students who worked on this, and also long term for Staffordshire University, and also as a model that could go to other universities. And we worked in quite a unique way in that we brought private money into the university, so we brought in £40,000 raised through EIS, Enterprise Investment Scheme. For the uninitiated, that's another conversation altogether. We brought private money in to make this film, which is a film I've been trying to make for a while, and I've tried other ways of getting the film away. And it had 2 well-known actors in it, so that's Andrew Gower, who's in Carnival Row, and Matthew McNulty, who's in loads of stuff. We've got Elbow, Craig from Elbow, to do the music, because I've done pop videos and all that kind of stuff before. But ostensibly, the deal with the university was that we did the master's course, and that we took, I think, 10 students through the master's course, and through that we got lots of in-kind stuff. And it was a great experience to do that. So we got things like the equipment, we got things like food, I think at a reduced cost, although some of the food wasn't that great. But that's another argument about universities and catering, perhaps. We got accommodation and stuff like that. And we also brought undergraduates through. Ironically, some of the undergraduates who worked on the film were perhaps better than some of the masters people on the film, because they, I don't know, maybe more motivated. I really wanted to see the film as almost the best thing that they could do, and almost a reward, and that would be something that we could kind of really move forward to.
And I don't want to interrupt, but but that sort of signifies that, you know, your focus as a filmmaker was also about facilitating the environment where you had professionals, the industry coming in, and the student learning being part of the process.
The big thing is, and I say this when I taught at undergraduate level, you know, people getting experience and being realistic about what they can do. You know, a lot of the master's students literally couldn't get out of bed to do it, and like some of them were effing brilliant, and some of them were the other way. And like to do 4 weeks on a film, getting up at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever it may be, getting up actually maybe is the first thing for them to do, but getting up and doing it regularly was a really, really big thing for them to do. It was also though, and this is, you know, looking at Carola's work, Culture 3.0, it was very interesting for investors to be involved with the university. And they thought that they were not only getting this tax benefit from the EIS, but they thought they were doing good with the money. And the film is also about cancer, and we were going to, if we ever get to profit, give profits to the Teenage Cancer Trust as well. So there was very many interesting ways for them to be involved with it. However, and this is I think where it's interesting where we stand on this. I started off like Carola is in a Culture 1.0 type university where unis were knowledge and givers of knowledge and all of that. And I thought universities were moving towards this 3.0 thing. I think even now it's even more towards this 2.0 section where it's just about numbers. For me, from the outside, I'm not employed by the union anymore, so I can say all this stuff freely. But you know, it's like it's about getting those numbers and the £4,000 or whatever it is through the door. And I think the uni could have now or in the future a lot more involvement in doing this, whether it's through working as a broker with people like other film agencies like the BFI, whether it's working on research on what the type of film is that you make, because you know maybe this was the wrong film to make through the university. You have to see the film. It's available on Amazon. Go and watch it. But also, and this is the key thing about the Culture 3.0 models, you looked at all podcasts and all that, but within film, a film made this way can only go out through the traditional ways. Is there a way of universities working together to form a platform to get work out that? Not this work, but also university students' work. Because
so hold that thought. We're just going to go through the panel and then we're going to go get into the discussion more. So Jodie?
For 10 years I was director of an academically housed contemporary arts centre for performance for Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm currently a freelance creative, a leadership coach and a fellow with Staffordshire University. I've not time today to really share my practice, but in summary it leans very much into co-creation, co-production and socially engaged processes. What I notice when I think about my roles, practices and perspectives in relationship to the University 3.0 concept is what I notice about lots of my work actually, with communities, businesses, organisations, charities and individuals. I notice a need for me to get tight with tensions. A need for me to be curious about the tensions that lie within my own practice and in relation to those people, institutions and organisations I'm working with. A need for me to notice the influence those tensions have on my practice and those people, institutions and organisations I'm working with. A need for me to consider the tensions that exist around what is changing and in flux, constant changes in local and global politics, environment, technology, the economy, personal, and also the health and personnel changes of those that I'm working with. And then there's the need to consider the tensions that exist associated to the constants, human needs such as connection, safety, physiological needs, and also the rhythms in nature. One of the greatest tensions I encountered when working at a university and continue to come up against when doing project work into universities now relates to a point Boehm argues in her book, Arts and Academia, that suggests Many university staff already feel that they have entered an era of University 3.0, whilst operating in the neoliberal, market-driven structures of current University 2.0 models. In my experience, the academics and staff I've worked with do lean into the three tenets identified in the University 3.0 model: facilitators of learning, curators of interfaces between knowledge and society, developers of environments where learning happens. Yet this work is being generated and nurtured despite the University 2.0 constraints. And such tension can create more workload, it can drain energy, divert focus, frustrate project teams, generate barriers, and as a result, sometimes make it difficult for external people to engage with universities. For me, until the University 3.0 concept is harnessed across the institution and thereby at a government and sector level, it is yet another occasion for me to look to my roadmap and continue to get tight with tension. Thank you.
Fabulous. Yeah, I'm going to dig into it in a bit, but Giulia?
Yeah, thank you. Hello everybody, I am Giulia Lapucci. I'm an Italian PhD student visiting here as staff. And today I would like to bring my position, that is an international doctoral perspective, basically. So maybe something different compared to what we heard up to now. And I will try to give you a quick overview, taking Italy as an example, which I believe has some points of contact with the UK context. And in Italy, universities are competing for funding at different levels: regional, national, and European. And especially now, with the European post-pandemic recovery funds, we are experiencing an unprecedented increase in doctoral grants. But unfortunately, those grants has a monthly amount that is inadequate to support the cost of living in major Italian cities. So broadly speaking, I can identify two main problems related to how we are shaping our research, that is the future of our university in Italy. The first problem is that only those in financial comfort can access to a doctoral career, and this condition increases inequality and social immobility. Second, that these funds are not as abundant when it comes to providing work continuity after the PhD, so we basically lost research lines during this path. Indeed, the level of postdoctoral academic career dropout in Italy is extremely high, because, of course, only those who are in a privileged position can continue to work within the academia under its precarious contracts. So this situation has many issues, in my opinion, in common with the culture and creativity sector, both in Italy and in the UK. As highlighted in the volume Culture is Bad for You, published in 2020, there are many problems that are related to the social background of people who are approaching to this type of careers. And I think that one of the main examples of this parallelism is the elitist perception of a career into the academia and of a career into the creative and cultural sector. So subsequently, speaking of the impacts, I think that we must focus on two phenomena related to the impact of doctoral research. And the first one is a general frustration experienced by PhD students due to the lack of valorization of PhDs as workers and not only as students. And I think that maybe this can sound strange sometimes, and also in Italy it sounds strange, but I think that it's something that we must stress out, because it's 3 years of our life in Italy and 4 years of life here in England. So to conclude, and the second point is that doctoral research is not valued, so we basically aren't able to see long term, and our impacts are lost during the path. And to conclude, I think that we are in a multiplication of doctoral research funds that are unfortunately, that will not unfortunately be able to develop in the future. And this is also a social issue and a waste of public funding that must be addressed.
Yeah, and of course, it's quite close to us, also in the research center that you and I are in, that we have to find fully funded PhD studentships, specifically in the arts and humanities, because especially those communities might have portfolio careers and are much more fragmented in their job security to a certain extent. Yeah.
In my opinion, fully funded PhDs are the only way to provide a future to research, because I think that this phenomenon is widespread at the moment. So we must be very careful, because we are losing a generation in the future.
Yeah, that's right. But it's not just about arts and humanities, it's of course also about impact. And I'm just going to hand over to Nick.
Thank you, Carola. Hi everyone, I'm Nick Gratton. I'm based in the RISE team and I'm Associate Professor for Community and Civic Engagement. So these words come up a lot in my work: co-production, co-creation, co-ownership. And I think that co-prefix, it can be used a lot around togetherness. We think about togetherness. But if we add different nouns to our co-prefix, actually, we come up with notions of shared jobs or shared responsibility. So co-authors, co-presenters, or co-stars, more appropriately. And I think I love that idea that it's a shared responsibility, because I think that sums up for me how at Staffs Uni actually we're moving towards that University 3.0 in terms of our community and civic engagement. It's really easy, isn't it, to think about work with communities that universities do in a bit of a deficit model. So a university with all its knowledge and its resources can go into a community and be saviours of that place, and we can help and support all those poor people in those communities. But that's not my experience of our work here at all. And I think ever since I've been here, actually, we've really focused on an asset-based approach. We've been thinking about what's strong in communities, not what's wrong in communities. And we've been working in equal partnership with those communities to create those changes. So the research that myself and our team do, and hopefully over time a number of other teams across the university do, it involves working with community researchers who are equal partners in our research process. And they're equal partners in creating those changes in communities. So actually, when we think about impact, it's really naive and a little bit egotistical, I think, to think about university having an impact in our place, because actually that impact's happening together. It's a collective approach. It's co-created impact. So it isn't just our impact, it's a shared impact that we need to be thinking about. And I think it's also quite a little bit naive as well to think that the impact that we have as a university and communities is all out there. It isn't. It's in here. The impact of the work that we do with communities really helps shape our work. It helps shape our projects. But crucially, I think, it shaped our university over the last couple of years. So we've used our participatory approaches to research, and we've started to embed those in our approach to connected communities. So we've got a community advisory network who are starting to help us think about how we work with those communities. A much more kind of structured approach to that work. So, in essence, and very quickly, I think, having place or community-based impact as a university through the research that we do, it's a shared responsibility. And we're not in the business of doing things to people. We're not in the business of doing things for our communities. We're about doing things together, creating impact together. And I think that's the place where we can really make a difference.
Nice, really nice. So I'm going to start us off with a question, but before I do, we're going to put up the Mentimeter on the screen. Which is on another screen, so we'll do that in just a second. Hopefully it hasn't thrown me out. If it has, then I'll get words that struck you, thoughts that struck you, questions that have you. And we're going to go into a sort of much more discursive debate about some things, with Jackie and me taking things either from the Mentimeter, or if you want to also raise your hand, then that's fine as well. But I'm going to, my first question is actually both to Jackie and Nick. And that is about, you mentioned something that impact might take time. And you talked about co-creation. And recently we just had a discussion also about how quite often what we forget is that when you think about a process, you co-create something and then you implement it. And depending on how much co-creation is in the creation process, that takes longer, but the implementation takes shorter. And I wonder if the same thing is with impact. So if you build impact into the whole project so that you can, it's almost trivial, it's there, it's there right from the start, does it mean that the impact that you will have is much faster there than if you produce it without co-creation, and then you have an impact strategy? So I don't know who wants to go first, Jackie or Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say briefly, if that's all right, that I agree that it does give the potential for the impact to happen really quickly, because it is happening as a part of the research. You do, it's often not kind of showcased as much, that kind of impact that happens as an integral part of the research project, that when you're particularly a lot of the work that Nick does, for example, within the Connect Communities team, working directly with communities, the impact is, yeah, it's an embedded part of the process. So I think that's a really good point, and I agree. I think the only thing that I'd mention also is the kind of the range of skills that is required to do that is one of the challenges, is that it's not the traditional skills that an academic kind of required, and you know, in days gone by. So I think it's a whole range of skills that's needed for that, but yeah, once you start on it, that impact can happen really quickly.
Yeah, and co-creation is hard as well.
Yeah. How long have we got? Yeah, it is, and I think we're often under that kind of time pressure, aren't we? To get things moving, to get things happening, and also I suppose, you know, I mean, I think for many of our community partners that we work with, they think we move really slowly, but you know, I think we do. We are under a pressure to make things happen, and quite often funding doesn't help that. I mean, the funding that is often available to community projects is so short term. And so that relationship then becomes a little bit challenging, that the funding's demanding that this work is happening, but of course we want to extend that relationship with that organisation or with that group. I think impact absolutely is embedded throughout the work that we do, and that, I think that was one of our challenges when we wrote our impact case study last year, is that our traditional view of impact is quite often we do some research, we write a paper and that has an impact. Whereas actually the work that we did was we did some research, and that process actually had the impact. So it was throughout the entire process. So it's quite different. I think we haven't quite caught up just yet in academia about how we square that circle. I referred a lot of throughout that writing of that impact case study about, you know, square pegs and round holes, because it felt there was a little bit of a mismatch there.
Yeah. And I want to take some concepts now from the wall. There were quite a few words about inclusivity, who has power, partnerships, and maybe Jodie, and I'm thinking Mike, in terms of the accessibility of these co-production processes or co-creation processes, they are, you know, universities are more permeable, more accessible, where partnerships are much more important also for devising a learning environment or a research production environment. What does that mean for inclusivity or exclusivity, or, you know, maybe Jodie first, I don't know.
I don't mind. Well, I was going to say the only thing in terms of when we were making the films and stuff like that, and they're wondering what you're doing.
Yeah.
They're asking you what you're doing, and you're saying we're making a film here, and it's been done through the university. So there's little ways of visibility like that. which sometimes aren't available to the more, because I'm thinking about how making a film for me through the university is different than people applying for doing micro-budget films through the BFI. And when you go to that, then there's probably a different set of cultural tests, but perhaps sort of aren't as open for all as a university can be.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not so afraid with how it works with supporting students coming here as well. But I think the idea that, you know, people can see you making films and then not have to go through such a I think there is an elitism perhaps within film, that within the institutions, that you come to university and try something that's a little bit more democratic and have an opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question I wanted to load up.
Yeah, no, interesting. Jodie?
Yeah, so the inclusivity, exclusivity thing for me, it comes down to the project teams within the university and how and kind of how they're prepared to work and the interfaces in the institution and externally and how that's going to work. So, you know, Nick's practice, for example, is just a brilliant example, has been for years, of how to do that well. But there are lots of barriers then that organisations and communities find when trying to engage with universities, be that structures, be that buildings, be that historical connotations to the land or the ideas of education and knowledge and who owns that, etc., etc. So again, we can look at universities as this big monolith, but actually when you go and build in the project work with other, as I say, communities or businesses, did a lot of work with enterprise departments in universities as well. So we're working with newly started organisations right through to large commercial organisations that were looking for innovation, basically, innovative ways of working or processes or products. And both happen. There are some organisations that won't engage because the structures were too exclusionary, the systems were too slow, the timelines were too slow to engage with the university. And then others...
Too slow for the uni?
No, yeah. Too
Well,
slow for the partner.
from the outside point of view, I find the uni to be really slow.
Yeah, too slow for the partner,
okay.
and they'll disengage.
Right.
They can go and get that work done at a quicker pace with a different partner.
Right.
So yeah, that's a way to exclude some of these relationships.
Yeah.
But then again, coming in and working with teams that understand ways to include people can be the difference where the work can happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's a challenge for large organizations that have much more formalized processes, which sometimes clash against more creative, fluid, agile processes, like filmmaking, like creative processes. And maybe just to bring Giulia in, because I know you also looked at the rural and the urban and how the participation in co-creation processes can support the connectivity between those two?
Yeah, I think that probably the main contribution that university can offer to the kind of situation that I study, that is mainly rural and inner areas, is the facilitator function. That is really what they're lacking at the moment. And if I look around in my region experiences, in each positive example of community co-production, there is one PhD student in anthropology, in sociology, that worked as an orchestrator within that community, valorizing the things that working and not pointing out the disadvantaged aspects, and bringing together the businesses and the university somehow, the local community and the cultural heritage. Most of the time the cultural heritage that community holds, shaping a sort of application of the FAR Convention sometimes, because they are empowering, even if I don't like this word so much, but they are valorizing, enhancing the knowledge of the locals, the know-how, and their interpretation of that heritage that is unique and that is what probably can provide sustainability in time to that heritage. So I think that this could be the role of university, and it would be lovely if it's something that can be done during the academic career, and not only if you leave university and do your practice as a freelancer or in other work condition. Because sometimes what I notice in Italy is that this kind of mechanism can be activated only when you are out of the university, because of this slow timing that we sometimes had because of funding, because of calls and everything. So I think this is really challenging, and this is what we should tackle at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, I mean, it goes into placemaking and the role of anchor institutions in placemaking or place shaping. These terms are also contested to a certain extent, but how working in partnership or co-creation contributes substantially into placemaking, and what universities have a role in that process, and how they have. It's really interesting. One question, and I am going to go back to Mike though, and maybe someone else who wants to actually deal with that, is the notion of quality. Now, I didn't put that onto the slide, but quite often quality, as we suggest in a sort of University 1.0 model and peer review, excellence, these words, we use them on an everyday, but quite often they can also be used to be exclusionary, to exclude some communities, to exclude some processes. But of course, there are genuine tensions. So you, Mike, a filmmaker?
I find that difficult.
Yeah? You want to make excellent films?
Well, it's like coming in, it's about, we were talking about inclusiveness before, but when I was making this film, I wanted to make the best film so we could sell it. And we were making a commercial film. That's one of the reasons we were making it for good reasons with the university and the training element, but also because it would be cheaper to do it that way, but we also still wanted it to be excellent. So but I suppose there's a link here with employability too.
Yeah, and there's a point of what you measure when you say cheaper. Because of course, yes, when you count the hours that are being contributed to it, I don't know if you have more hours or less hours, maybe the equivalent number of hours.
I did the budget for the film, and I also did what it would have cost.
Right.
So in a way, you are getting a similar level. So it's about measuring all that.
Yeah.
But for me, and again, it's difficult. I wanted everything to be the best it could be, but everyone could be included in that best. You had a chance to be that best. Unfortunately, I had my two heads on, so when we were running the first part of the course, it was very much, come and speak to Daddy, we'll have this word and all that. And suddenly we're making a film, we've got market pressures, we've got heads of department, working professionals who are getting paid money to do this. And we are having morning seminars where we all meet with everybody and we go, are you all right, and all that kind of thing. But at that time, I switched from my teaching head to my we bloody get it done head, because we have only a certain amount of time to do it. But I don't think that's a bad thing, because I want, and I think it's a big driver for this university, for the universities as well, is, I want students to be able to go and get a job at the end of it. I want them to get a credit and it to be meaningful and something that's good as well. And I think we shouldn't shy away from quality being a driver, as well as everyone having access to be part of that as well. And
negotiating these tensions of, let's say, the industry sector having certain expectations and universities and students have certain expectations that are much more in learning. That means that the practices might need to be innovated, there might need to be new practices. The Get Talking is a good example for that, where we have to have processes that allow that to happen more without friction, but with much more fluidity and with these supporting, underpinning infrastructures in place.
Yeah, and I think there's, Jackie said about there needing to be, academics need different skills, actually, and I think for me, that's something that you know, and I'm thinking about research excellence in this case. You know, how do we marry those two things up between kind of community-based practice and engagement and research and research excellence? And it's a real challenge, but I think that's something that the academic needs to be able to manage, and I think that's something that we need to maybe think about and develop as well.
Can I just ask, are there specific questions? We took some words from the board, but are there very specific questions that you have to the panel? We've got sort of 2 minutes. Martin?
2 minutes. I think it's incredibly contradictory because then she walks along and adding value, taking value away, extracting. Can you give me one thing each of you that each of you ought to be doing for Stash Uni specifically?
And actually, you can say that to me as the academic, not as a vice chancellor. I'll have a conversation with the outside. Is there anything you ought to be doing in this space that is simply not?
Shall we start from your side?
I think for me, and I'm talking, you know, obviously within my role and the various different aspects of that, but I think for me, it's something about how do we develop this kind of civic culture or Uni 3.0 culture, I guess, that is kind of consistent across the university. We've got so many different aspects that have got those touching points with communities, with civic, with business, and how do we develop a coherent is probably the wrong word, but a culture that's recognised, a brand, if you like, for us as a university, that partners, whoever they are, go, yeah, that's it, that's
nice.
We want to engage with
Giulia?
So you mean a sort of shared knowledge embedded within the university staff, researchers,
Absolutely.
workers?
Yeah, bringing everybody in and having that consistency across the institution.
Yeah, actually I think that, I agree, I think that that's the key. Like, if you want to put yourself into a quadruple helix context successfully, you must be aware of what you're doing, and you must be aware of that at all levels, because otherwise it doesn't work. And that was probably, my speech was quite long, but that was in a nutshell what I meant. We need to provide to each worker equal dignity and equal opportunity to be impactful in their personal contribution. And this is why we need PhD students that are able to think long term. This is why we need researchers that can help them in shaping their research in a more impactful way.
We got to make it really, really short. We're almost over time. Quick.
Yeah, there's something there about the stakeholder journey. I'm thinking so many systems and processes are set up for the organisation that makes sense to the organisation, but think about that externally. How do they work for those people, whoever they are, big business, small business, individuals, communities, potential students, all these stakeholders? What does the stakeholder journey look like from the outside? Because that's where some of the tensions and barriers are existing for lots of people.
I'm going to ask them possible one sentence, Mike.
I think the quick thing for me is stability. I think within the film and media, the staff turnover's been really quick, it's been cut down. The management, I've seen 7 or 8 different people since I've been there, so I have some big ideas that I'd like to talk to someone about them, but it always changes every 5 minutes. So chance to do it anyway.
Okay, yes, just very quickly, for me it's about providing the environment that is necessary to support a really positive impact culture and recognising that that's partly about things like REF, but also about enabling people to achieve the goals that matter the most to them.
Yeah, and for me, and we'll wrap up with that, it's probably a focus away from content to environment. So how can we be a learning institution that really looks at the environment where knowledge comes from all directions and bring partners in to facilitate that environment? It's a complete different way of thinking about it. It has implications for quality assurance, it has implications for how we deliver things, but I think it's coming anyway. So I think academics have already exploited pedagogies that fit into that context, and some of our fabulous tools like Get Talking or participatory approaches or co-production with communities or impact, you know, it's an example of that. Can I just say thank you for a brilliant, hopefully we have pictures of this fabulous scene. I'm going to take a picture about that as well. Can I just also thank you for a fabulous panel? Give them a hand. And thank you very much for today. Hopefully that was interesting. And I think we're going to have a 10-minute break before we go to the next session. I don't know when the next session is, but